You're listening to episode 95 of Mouth Dancing with your host Young. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, truly. Something I wanted to discuss today is a phenomenon that Asians experience anywhere outside of Asia. Is random people will just say ni hao or konnichiwa or annyeong, something like that. If they see someone who's just East Asian looking, doesn't matter if you're Chinese or Korean or Japanese or not. They'll just say it to you, ni hao. I don't know, maybe they think it's funny, or they're definitely not sincere about it. They're not trying to do it to actually greet you and start a conversation. There's usually some sort of passive aggressiveness about it. Or there's a stupid smirk on their face when they do it. Like they think it's really funny. And yeah, it's just something that happens to Asians all the time. But something really funny I saw on Reddit the other day. There's a foreigner living in Japan, and the person was complaining that Japanese people say hello to them all the time in English. And this person was getting really fed up with it, and they were like, I'm so annoyed by this. It happens to me all the time. And I just thought, oh my, how the tables have turned. Thought it was just pretty funny reading that. I got a real chuckle out of it. It's like, oh, now you know how it feels, fuckface. How do you like that? You don't like it very much, do you? You don't like being treated like an obvious foreigner constantly. But in this case, the person really is a foreigner. They're from out of country, they're visiting. Or maybe they're living there permanently, I don't know, but still they're not from there originally. But this happens to Asian Americans who were born and raised in America, so it's pretty different actually. And comparatively, America has much more racial diversity than East Asia. And that's due to history. It's not due to anything like unfairness. East Asians didn't colonize the planet and, take over other lands and stuff. We were pretty chill, just hanging out in our own backyard and pretty happy there. That's why we have less racial diversity, because if you go around taking over other people's countries, taking all their resources, then those countries will get poor, and those people will want to immigrate because their countries are poor now. After the Korean War, South Korea was very, very poor, and a lot of Koreans immigrated at that time because the country was destroyed by years and years of wars and colonization by Japan. And then America after that. Now there's a huge military base, US military base in South Korea. South Korea is just kind of like a very Americanized East Asian country now. I mean, they still speak Korean, but the culture is very Americanized. Anyway, kind of went off on a digression there. The whole ni hao thing, it happens to me too. It's happened to me lots of times. And it's not just white people who do it either. It's like black people, Latino people, Middle Eastern people do it. Just anyone who's not East Asian. This is something that they'll just do for some reason when they see an Asian person. They'll say, ni hao, or konnichiwa, annyeong, that kind of thing. And it's funny too, because I guarantee you 99% of these people don't actually speak the language, so they're basically sparking a conversation in another language that they don't even speak. It'd be like me going up to a French person and saying, bonjour or something. And then they start speaking back to me in French. I wouldn't know what to say after that because I don't actually speak French. So if I were to actually start speaking in another language to this person, like Korean or Japanese or Chinese, they wouldn't even know how to respond after that. So it's like they're biting off more than they can chew. Or they're not doing it sincerely, which is what I suspect is true most of the time. They're just doing it to be annoying and to fuck with you, to make you feel like an outsider, basically. And another thing I've been considering recently is animal flatulence. Animals fart, right? If you've ever owned a dog or a cat, you know that sometimes they rip one. Sometimes they're silent, but they fart. All animals fart. Or all mammals do, at least. I don't know about other species like insects or reptiles and amphibians or birds. I don't know if they fart. Maybe they do. They probably build up gases in their bodies when they're digesting shit, right? But I'm just talking about mammals. I know that all mammals fart. And I wonder if that's true of whales, actually. Well, they must fart too. But they do it underwater. And when they fart, like, big bubbles come out of their butt, I guess. Since they're underwater. It's like if you fart in a bathtub, right? But you don't really hear wild animals farting too much, right? It's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, does it make a sound? Well, if a squirrel farts in the woods and no one's around to hear it, or smell it, or witness it or document it, did it really happen? But it must have happened, right? I'm really curious about this for some reason. Like, you don't really see it in nature shows either. They don't really show that side of animals, like an animal farting or, defecating or urinating. They don't really show that too much. They show other stuff. I guess because it's for television and people don't really want to see that necessarily. But it's a part of life. It's a part of nature for sure. I'm curious, like, what a hippo fart sounds like. Or a rhino fart. Or a giraffe. Or a grizzly bear. A raccoon. Or a skunk. Or, what else is there? A wolf. I want to know what their farts sound like. They probably just sound like regular farts, like any other mammal's farts, but they might be really, like, loud and thunderous, right? Like, a hippo fart must be crazy. And they're underwater a lot, too, so they must fart underwater a lot. And there must be huge bubbles, right? It's a part of nature that we just don't get to witness too much. And I'm a little bit sad about it. Because I'd like to see that. I don't know why. I guess it's sort of a childish thing that to think farts are kind of interesting or funny. But that's something that sticks with us through our lives. We develop that weird fascination with them when we're children because they're just so funny sounding, right? And you're like, what was that? I wonder if most people's first fart is like their own fart and they're like, what was that? That weird sound that I just made and maybe it stinks. Or maybe one of their parents, like their dad ripped a fart nearby and the kid was like, what was that? And it sounds naturally funny, I think. It makes a weird sound. And that's just kind of funny. Lastly, I wanted to talk about this tweet that I took a screenshot of. And it said that the Canadian accent was voted the sexiest in the world. And I'm pretty sure the account that posted this was Canadian. And the survey was probably conducted by Canadians. And probably most of the people who responded were Canadians. Because no one thinks the Canadian accent is the sexiest in the world. Have you ever heard that? I've never heard that before. It's like, I'm not very good at doing accents, but you know what? You know the gist, right? You get what I'm talking about. If you've ever heard a Canadian accent, they sound kind of goofy, actually. I can't imagine anyone getting turned on by that or thinking it's really sexy sounding. Like, ooh, what a mysterious Canadian. Their goofy-ass accent. Maybe if you're talking about the French part of Canada and they have sort of a French accent, that could be kind of sexy sounding, but the rest of Canada where they have just the regular English speakers, no, it's probably one of the worst accents in the world. probably one of the least sexiest accents in the world. It's like you're making out with this person and then they suddenly say something in Canadian accent, and you're like, oh, I don't like that. Suddenly the whole situation's deflated, right? And that's when the lovemaking stops, is when you hear the Canadian accent. No one wants to hear that. It's not sexy. It's not funny. Well, it's funny, actually. I mean, a Canadian person could be talking about pretty much anything and it'll sound funny because of their accent. That's why Canadians are really good at comedy. There's a lot of really funny Canadian comedians, and a lot of it just has to do with their accent. They don't really even have to put much work into it. They just have to talk and it sounds funny. But yeah, that's the Canadian accent right there. They say stuff like hoser, right? It just sounds funny. It's a very passive-aggressive culture, too. There's nothing sexy about passive-aggressiveness. Yeah, the whole thing is like the unsexiest thing I can ever imagine, actually. It's all cold and dark up there, and they have funny accents. And they're very passive-aggressive. And they're funny because they have a goofy accent. I don't know how that result came about, but I call bullshit on it, as I'm sure most people did who saw it. I think maybe it was just to generate controversy, right? A lot of these social media things where they make ridiculous, outrageous claims, the whole point is to just start up a conversation and get people riled up, right? To get more engagement and likes and views and all that stuff. That's probably what it was about, and it worked, right? Because here I am. I've been ranting about it for the last 5 minutes. They got me. They got me good. And for that, I guess I'll give them some credit. Yeah, I just had to shred their argument to bits. I had to roast them for that. And they deserved it. And on that note about Canada, I'd like to end this podcast episode, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.